To my future wife, an open letter, part 2, February 14th, 2024, 12:45 p.m. Dear Grace, today is Valentine's Day. However, I know nothing about you, so the concept of writing something romantic is odd. If I knew you, I would, but since I don't, anything I could possibly say would be generic in a pathetic attempt to attract the biggest audience. Also, I think all the holidays are bullshit. I'm okay with playing the game for the kids, but deep down you should understand my motivation. On the other hand, if I did know you and could write something that touched you, I would, today or any day of the year. However, I don't know you from Eve, so happy Valentine's Day, for whatever that's worth. I hope by next year on this day we are together, married, and if you're interested, with a baby on the way, assuming my junk still produces seed. How's that for romance? Anyway, I added the time to these letters. It's important to me for research. I notice my creativity/incentive varies throughout the day. I'm looking for a pattern. 5:43 p.m. When I watch Rob's videos, Grace, I notice how close my day-to-day life is to his in some ways, but definitely not in others. Rob is surviving hourly, looking for work and making videos for people like me looking for inspiration. Below is a typical day in my life, Grace. It's similar to Rob's in that I normally go to the dollar store or library consistently. Different in that I have a place to go to when I'm done. I don't have to worry about where my next meal will come from. Plus, I can shower or use the washroom whenever I want. With my day, I wake up and wish I could go back to sleep for eternity. When I realize this is impossible, I review my options for the next 24 hours. My choices are the same every day. I can get up and write immediately, I can write later, or I can not write at all. This morning I woke up at 11:30 a.m., walked to 7-Eleven for an energy drink, woke up again, and began writing. I didn't get far, as you can see by the timestamp. In fact, after writing for about an hour, I stopped and watched some of Joe Rogan's interview with Will Storr, and then had a nap. Not very exciting, but also not a daily occurrence. Every day is different. Today I felt like writing earlier, but chose the nap. My choice. Who's going to stop me, and who cares? Do you care if I take a nap, Grace? I doubt it. I either like or need fresh air to wake up and feel like I'm part of this world. Rob sleeps near a highway and hears the noise all night long. He can't turn it off. I live beside a transit station, a roadway, the commercial train tracks, a river with tugboats, and a bridge that once a day someone has an accident driving over, and the entire fucking police force, fire department, and paramedics arrive with sirens blazing. Unlike Rob, I can turn it all off by closing my window. 80% less noise immediately, and other distractions like music or Netflix or even my fridge is enough to drown out the non-stop noise outside. That's not enough if I have the option of earplugs to remove the final 20% to live in perfect silence, which is how I sleep, with earplugs shoved deeply into my ears. If I lived in Rob's camp, I wouldn't want the silence. I'd want my brain to notice any noise other than traffic for my safety. I'm not sure if Rob does that or uses earplugs. I'll ask him on his next video and let you know, Grace. When I wake up in the morning/afternoon, I think just a few more hours. Then I listen. If I can hear the road noise through the earplugs with the window closed, I'm screwed. I'm awake, and it's unlikely I'll get back to sleep. If I'm lucky and I don't hear the traffic, I quickly realize I have to use the washroom, which I do as fast as possible before attempting to return to sleep. However, I have options. I'm free to do as I please. Rob has a bit more stringent routine to maintain his daily survival. Based on his videos, Rob's routine seems to be get up, go to the gym to shower, then the library to send out resumes and recharge phone/battery, get supplies from the dollar store, return to camp. Maybe not in that exact order, but in general. I mentioned in my previous letter about nearly being homeless. For a couple of years, I stayed with friends and family. It's difficult not to feel guilty for intruding or being in the way when someone has kindly offered you a couch to sleep on. In those situations, I would get up early, I could barely sleep anyway, and head to the coffee shop or library for the day to write. In that environment, I was forcing myself to write by remaining out of the house as long as possible and intruding as little as possible. To be fair, the environment forced me to write more than I write now. Unfortunately, the writing seemed forced. unlike now. Maybe Grace, one day I'll share those words with you in private. Anyway, I think when I first moved into the place I'm living now, I continued that rush mentality. Wake up, shower, shave, and then almost run to Starbucks across the bridge, or take the train to the library. I shouldn't have said I was nearly homeless in my first letter, Grace. It's true, but it was by choice. I've worked full-time my entire life, either for myself or for others, but I've always been employed, never rich, but always comfortable enough to have a house, car. Okay, there was a time in my 20s when I used EI, like Universal Basic Income, and spent my days photographing nature, but after my child graduated high school, and a few years before COVID, I traveled around Canada and the USA, mostly Canada. I had no fixed address. The few possessions I owned I either gave away or stored in my ex-wife's house. At the time, I'd worked for a software company from home, so I simply made my home the road and began traveling. They didn't know and they didn't care once they found out, as the whole company only met in person once a year anyways. It was a perfect scenario for a while, Grace. The Airbnbs were cheap and easy to book, and only slightly more than the rent I was paying for years. I started with the car, but eventually discovered everything I wanted to do in any city in Canada was accessible by foot or public transportation, and dumped the car. Reduced all my belongings to one backpack and continued to move. All of my belongings still fit in one backpack, Grace. Some would call me a minimalist, but I have no philosophy. My current possessions are all I've had for years, and all I'll need for years, except underwear. Overall, I crossed the country 3 times, once by car to deliver my offspring to university, once by via rail, and once by Greyhound. I'm rambling, Grace. The short story is the road was great, but only because I was working and could afford the same luxuries. To continue the lifestyle, I was forced to work, but at some point, I forgot when, it became less about the travel and more about the words. I wanted to write, but I wanted to write alone, free from the influence of others, including any form of boss. My solution was to trade in the stable, long-term income I currently had for part-time contract gigs that could dry up at any moment and leave me penniless. Did I mention I'm not rich and don't have any savings, Grace? What a catch, I know, especially on V-Day. I'm tired of this part of my story, Grace, so I'll explain more another day. But needless to say, my plans did not go according to plan. Almost, but no. On a different note, one thing I did learn on the road was how to lose weight. Since this is as much a confession as a letter to you, Grace, I used to be fat, really fat. It was my choice to become fat. It wasn't glandular, or medication, or any of the countless excuses people use. I know why I ate too much or crappy food. It was my choice. At some point, in my travels, I discovered keto and fasting. This was still when everyone thought your heart would instantly explode if you ate a tablespoon of butter or fat. This is clearly not true, Grace, as I've lost over 140 pounds on keto, and I ate a ton of fat. Buckets of fat, Grace. To be precise, unflavored coconut oil was my primary source of calories. I only ate meat and cooked it in coconut oil, drenched. If you're a vegan, Grace, you may want to skip this part. Once I realized keto works, and once my doctor confirmed my blood work was normal after I ate nothing but meat and fat for 6 months, I went all in and didn't turn back until I dropped from 285 pounds to 160 pounds. Not only did it worked perfectly, Grace. I put some of the weight back on. I don't consider myself fat now, but I notice when my belly gets in the way. At some point in my keto journey, I stopped feeling hungry in the morning. I used this to push myself to fast longer each day. I kept no food in my place. I kept no food in whatever place I was staying, same as I do now. I would wake up and work from the Airbnb or go to a coffee shop and write while pretending to work. And then at the end of the day, find a grocery store for my nightly meal/feast. Whatever I bought, I would consume that evening, even though I forced myself to eat too much. I'd rather be extra full and have the temptation to eat the leftovers in the morning or middle of the night. Eventually, I stopped feeling hungry in the evening, or was too lazy to go out and buy food and would skip a day of eating, then a couple of days, and then a week, and then finally a month. I didn't eat for a month, Grace. I felt great. However, I quickly learned that few people in my life understood why, or no matter how I tried to explain it, I couldn't. So I gave up and quit trying. I attempted to write a book about it, but I believe keto has been proven safe now. I know it still works for me. Anytime I feel my belt tightening, I spend a week or two on keto and don't have to buy new pants. I think if I was on the Serengeti and starving, forced fasting, the instinct would be to find a path to an animal I can kill or a plant I can eat. I noticed when fasting creates an intense desire not to find food, but to find a better path in life. I wasn't on the Serengeti. I had money. I could eat. I could end my fast any time by ordering a pizza. Nothing prevented me. But I think my brain went into survival mode, not for food, but for a career, the equivalent to food. I knew my existing employer wouldn't last a lifetime. I liked the paycheck, but disliked working for others. I always have. I could work for other people, but it's always the same. I could work for other people, but it's always the same ending. I quit. Or maybe I was delirious from not eating for weeks, Grace. Either way, it was clear to me I could not work for others the rest of my life. So I quit my job and through a series of choices was nearly homeless. I'm not. I'm fine now. I have CPP the rest of my life. End of story. Except you, Grace. Where are you? What are you doing? When will we meet? I've yet to explain my day, Grace, and now I'm over it. I'll try again in the next letter. So far, I think it's safe to say this is the worst dating profile ever. No photos, just a story about a broke old man with no prospects. Lucky you, Grace. On the other hand, if you get my sense of humor, then it doesn't matter. You'll understand. Thanks for reading, Grace. David.